This is the room he was in.
This is the room he was in.
150 years later, my honey could be in his chair.
Isn't that wonderful?
That is
and I will
crazy.
Tell you, you know.
I'm heading to Albany, where I was born and raised, to see my Aunt Peggy, my mama's sister. Now, I'm named Paula after my mama's maiden name, Kari Paul, and that's why I want to know more about her side of the family. How are you?
I'm just wonderful. Come over here and have a seat. I've got some things I want to show you.
Oh, I see you got some pictures out.
Yes, and don't they look beautiful?
Beautiful. Oh, I recognize this picture, Aunt Peggy. There at River Bend, Mama in her waitress outfit, along with her daddy. I know that Granddaddy Paul's name is John Larkin Paul.
And his father was John Little Paul, Liddle-E.
Granddaddy Paul's daddy.
Right.
It's the first time in my life that I've ever heard that.
This is John Little Paul's death certificate.
Okay, his date of birth was April the 3rd, 1860. It even has his father's name, W.B. Paul, and his mother's maiden name, Eliza Batts. She was also born in Lee County.
Okay.
It looks like the apple didn't fall far from the tree. My great-granddaddy, John Little Paul, and his parents, my great-great-grandparents, were all from the same area of Georgia where I was born. So my great-grandfather, John Little Paul, was born 1 year before the Civil War broke out. So we have already gone back 150 years, and I hadn't taken a step yet. I had a visit with my Aunt Peggy, and she was able to give me a death certificate of my great-grandfather, John Little Paul.
Okay.
This is about all I have to give you.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So we have the year of birth.
Right.
Our next step would be to look at the 1870 census.
Okay.
Because John Paul would be 10 years old. Let's get the computer and
Okay.
go to...
And you're going to help me with this,
Right.
aren't you? Because, look, I don't even know how to open it too much. All right. I'm going to have to put on my little cheaters
Okay, I've got those too.
to be able to see.
We're going to Ancestry.com,
Oh,
the
okay.
census and voter list.
So we're going to 1870?
Right.
So we want to type in John Paul. He lived in Lee County.
Correct. Okay. Now, I think we've got John Paul here.
He was 11 years old.
Right. And
He
he's living
lived
in
over here.
in the household of John Batts.
Batts, that was my great-great-grandmother's maiden name.
Right. As on the...
Death certificate.
So right now, it's pretty clear that John Batts could be a relative of John Paul.
Is there any way we can find out why John Little was living with the Batts?
I think what we need to do next is look for his parents. We're going to look for W.B. Paul.
WB, there he
There's
is.
W.B. Let's just print this out, and we
Okay.
can take both 1870 census records and study them together. Here we have W.B. Paul and Eliza, so we know they were living. And let's just take a look back over here at John Batts. And we see John Paul down here.
Living down there.
Right.
What does that say right there? Attending school.
It's possible that there was no school near W.B. Paul.
So he's staying with his mama's family. But now how are Eliza and John Batts related?
Let's look and see if we can find the 1850 census with Eliza to see if we can determine who her parents are.
Okay, so Eliza Batts.
Right.
And then we go down to search.
Right. We have the 1850 census up.
Okay, there's Eliza.
Exactly. Look who's her parents.
John Batts.
And
Mary. These census records have confirmed that my great-grandfather, John Little Paul, was living with my great-great-great-grandparents, John and Mary Batts. I'm curious what the records can tell me about them. And John Batts was a planter. Does that mean farmer?
it means they had a plantation.
A plantation?
Yeah.
Wow. How would I find out more about John Batts?
The Georgia Archives here has a general name index.
Okay.
So let's go take a look at that. This up on the counter, a bit easier for you.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Uh-oh, I think I'm getting close. John Batts. Here he is. H.R. Lee County. What does that mean?
House of Representatives.
A politician.
Yes.
I've traveled to the old state capitol building in Milledgeville, Georgia, where I've arranged to meet with historian Bob Wilson, who has been gathering information on John Batts's political career.
The reason I asked you here, I thought this would be, in exploring the history of your ancestor, the most appropriate place in the old legislative chamber where he actually served and spoke and introduced legislation.
This is the room he was in.
This is the room he was in.
150 years later, my honey could be in his chair.
Isn't that wonderful?
That
And I will
crazy.
tell you, you know, if you are kind of wondering about the atmosphere of this room, I'm
it's
thinking,
beautiful.
back then, you would have had spittoons around the place. You know, this is a male-dominated society. A man's world here. It would have been a lot more commotion.
Well, I want to know about my great-great-great-grandfather Batts, what he stood for, what kind of man he was.
This is from a Milledgeville newspaper. As you can read the headlines here.
A very large and enthusiastic meeting of the democracy of Lee County was held to ratify the nomination of Breckinridge and Lane and to appoint delegates to the electoral convention to be held in Milledgeville. The chair appointed the following gentlemen delegates to the Milledgeville Convention: F.H. West, John Batts. What is this about, Bob?
What they are doing is they're going to come up here and argue that Georgia should support John Breckinridge for president. John Breckinridge at the time, in 1860, was actually Vice President of the United States. He was very, very strong on preserving Southern institutions. And so they felt...
I think I got you.